Real estate prices in the Lower Mainland are absolutely crazy. They are on highs in comparison to some of the most expensive real estate markets anywhere in the world. And the problem is they're about to get worse. Beginning in March of 2025, all new construction homes in the province of British Columbia will have to be constructed so they can be easily adapted so that anyone with a disability can live in them. Absolutely setting off alarm bells with local developers about the costs that are going to be added to this new construction. Now, I am a huge advocate of making homes better for those with disabilities. I was so excited to hear this. In the past, I've made donations to the Rick Hansen Foundation. As an example, one of our absolute Canadian heroes, Rick Hansen and the Rick Hansen Foundation, are all about creating a world without barriers, stating more than 8 million Canadians have some form of disability and the numbers are growing. I've even been fortunate enough to meet Rick Hansen in person, have great conversations with him, and he was an incredible person, incredibly kind, and even sent me this book, and he signed the inside of it just for me. I know many people with disabilities, and this is an incredible inclusion to make our homes more accessible for absolutely everybody. That's when I stumbled across an article I found on the Globe and Mail, where there was comments made by the Urban Development Institute's president and a few more comments that got me a little nervous. Their comments were followed by those in the architectural community with concerns about the added cost of this initiative, as well as who's going to be impacted the hardest from it. In today's video, I want to show you exactly what that article said. We'll dive into each point in the article exactly, and I want you to hang around to the very end as well, because I got 2 questions for you that I'm very curious on what your answer is. If that all sounds good, let's get into it. Hey, it's Darren here. If you're thinking of moving to Surrey, White Rock, or any of the surrounding suburbs, subscribe below so you can be the first to learn about the market and the areas. And like so many others, we've helped in the process of buying or selling a home. If you need help in the process, whether it's today or 6 months from now, use the link in the description to book a time to speak with me. We'll help you make sure that your move is the absolute best that it could ever be. Before we jump into the article, I was struck with trying to understand this problem a little bit better. Through the Rick Hansen Foundation, they have done incredible work in terms of just helping people understand the impact of people with disabilities and how they have to go about living in, let's say, regular life, where a lot of the infrastructure we have and facilities and whatnot are just not built to allow these people to have easy access to certain things. Now, the Rick Hansen Foundation's website says we are living in a world with more than 8 million Canadians having some sort of disability, but in fact, that might even be old statistics. Statistics Canada, as an example, shows that roughly about 22% of Canadians are living with a disability. And of those, anywhere between 40 to 47% of those are living with a physical disability. So if you think 22% of Canadians and almost half of them are living with a physical disability, that's almost 10% of our population. That's an unbelievable number of people that have mobility challenges in our community. So in comes this article. And the concerns of the Urban Development Institute, well, they're valid because real estate is already incredibly expensive in the Lower Mainland, especially Vancouver. And a lot of those costs get put on to the new home buyer, the person who is buying that new inventory. This would be an example of that, and this isn't a new thing. There's 2 things I want to bring to your attention. One is called a Community Amenity Contribution, or a CAC, and the other is a Development Cost Charge, or a DCC. Both of these are among many other government fees that are built into the process of building a new home. A recent Business in Vancouver article estimated that roughly 29.25% of the finished purchase price of a new construction home just goes strictly to red tape and the government. That's almost 1/3 of the price of new construction, and that is an unbelievable figure. Let's put this into a little bit more perspective though, just to really help wrap our heads around this. Now, working off the CAC 2002 number, because no inflationary adjustments were made in 2023 due to target recalibration, you can see that in Vancouver, a 6-story residential building in the Cambie corridor was recommended for a 2002 CAC target rate of $112.49 per square foot. Now, if you're doing the math at home, that works out to over $89,000 for an 800 square foot apartment. Let's move over to the DCCs, or in Vancouver, as they call them, DCL. hotels, development cost levies. On our example of an 800 square foot condo, that comes in at just over $15,000. And those aren't the only costs that are associated into buying new construction. So let's jump into this article a little bit. Let's dissect it, and I will leave a link to the article down below so you can check it out for yourself. And while you're down there, don't forget to subscribe to this channel so you don't miss out on any of the updates about White Rock real estate, Surrey real estate, or anything that's going on in the wild world of British Columbia real estate, just like this article we are discussing today. All right, so the article goes on to say all new homes constructed in British Columbia will be required starting next March to be easily adapted so anyone with a disability can live in them, but builders are raising concern about the expenses of the changes, prompting Vancouver to delay compliance. Developers say the new rules will add potentially tens of thousands to the cost of all new homes because ensuring all builds can accommodate someone with a wheelchair or a walker, for example, will require bigger kitchens, bathrooms, and bedrooms, among other changes. BC is the first province to make such a sweeping requirement in its building code, one that is being heralded by disability advocates. But builders' concerns have so alarmed the City of Vancouver, which has its own building code, that Council recently voted to push implementing these changes by a year to May 2026. This is the quote that I was interested in by the president of the Urban Development Institute. It can mean having to increase the size of a unit by 5 to 10%. Adding costs means you can't build what people can afford. That's kind of interesting to think about. Meanwhile, disability advocates say that the changes have been a long time coming and are not as expensive as the development industry is claiming. They argue that once the builders plan in advance on how to incorporate the improvements, the features will be routine in every building and will not require individualized designs. That's a fair comment, I guess, but if they do have to add things that aren't typically added, that is going to increase the construction costs. And I don't know the answer to this, but I would be very curious as to what the Urban Development Institute would have to gain by not providing accurate numbers. It's a great thing that BC has said that we are doing this. We're not backing down on this one, said Brad McConnell, a spokesperson for the Rick Hansen Foundation, a registered charity that tackles disability barriers. The foundation has been involved in discussions with the ministry and industry representatives on the new code requirements, which will include wider doors, plugs and switches at reachable places on a wall. That should all be pretty easy to add, I would think, or change. Stronger walls and ceilings to support installation of lifts and grab bars and level entries to balconies and showers. Okay, so those are going to be a little more expensive and have to take more resources to do. The industry has had decades to do this, and they fought us every step of the way. BC started consultations on the changes to its building code 2 years ago and put out the proposed new regulations in December. BC Housing, the province's social housing agency, says it will fully comply with the regulations coming in, although some of its projects, especially seniors housing, are already built to be fully adaptable. But a report by Vancouver City Manager to Council 2 weeks ago recommended delaying harmonization with the BC Code over concerns the new requirements could tip already marginal projects in the city beset by high interest rates and construction costs into the no-can-do zone, the last thing councillors want amid pressure from the province and the public to get new housing built. That's an interesting comment. It is very difficult right now and expensive to get new construction projects off the ground. By potentially increasing project costs and resulting in fewer dwelling units, the new requirements could add to these pressures and impact the supply of new housing, particularly for much needed new secured rental and social housing projects, which face the greatest viability challenges, the report goes on to say. Accessibility standards, I'm going to skip a little bit of this and get to the meat here. Bryce Roshich, a founding partner to 33-year-old RH Architects, says it impacts small-sized units the most. If you're designing for 530 square feet, it adds 50 to 70 square feet per unit. When you're selling places by the square foot, 50 to 70 square feet is a huge addition in terms of not only the size of the place, obviously, but the cost of that new construction being passed on to the ultimate person, the home buyer. He estimated that at the current cost of construction, that works out to $50,000 to $70,000 more. At one project that he developed plans for in Surrey, it reduced the number of units that could be built on the site by 9%. He goes on to say municipalities with good policies to promote accessibility, such as the City of North Vancouver, require 20% of apartments in a building to be accessible, which kind of goes on to match the amount of Canadians with disabilities, but not physical disabilities. 22% disabilities in general was the numbers from Statistic Canada. So we're not going to go through the rest of the article. I will leave that again in the description below, but this is where I have some questions for you namely two that I would love for you to answer in the comments section below. The first one is, what do you think of this change? It's obviously going to be passed on to the home buyer. So we've got roughly, in my really bad calculations, about 10% of the population who is going to see a huge benefit from this. So that's not a small amount. But I'm curious, what do you think of this new regulation? It is definitely going to add to the cost of new construction. The second question that I have for you though is this. Is it fair for this cost to be shouldered by the new home buyer, the person who's buying this property initially? Like, let's be realistic here. The developers are not going to take in these costs and eat them. They're not going to take that out of their profit. They're not in the business of charity. They're there to make money. So fair enough. But it's really the person who's going on to buy that unit in the end that's going to have to pay these fees. So they're paying to construct these new homes into the future that are going to allow people with mobility challenges or disabilities to be able to retrofit these properties to, be effective for them. This isn't a new thing either. There's other things like this that you may or may not be aware of that get baked into the cost of new construction that the first-time home buyer or that new home buyer buying that new property ultimately shoulders. A great example of this is park space. So when you go to develop a new property, a new multi-unit property, you have to pay fees to the city, and part of those fees go towards creating new park space. Okay, well, that sounds great. But the interesting thing about that is that new park space is enjoyed by the entire community, not just the people who are moving into new construction properties in the neighborhood. So is it really fair that they shoulder the cost of this? Is there better ways of funding this and coming up with the money? Now, I've got some ideas on how the city can come up with that money, but that's not what this video is all about. This video is about you. Number one, making you aware of the changes, and number two, getting your opinion to see what you think if there is a better way to do this moving forward, so we can not only support the many people in our communities that have mobility challenges, but also make it fair for everybody buying and selling property, not just those who are buying new construction property. And listen, if you're someone out there who is looking to buy a home, you are definitely going to want to take advantage of our BC Home Buyers course. Typically a $350 investment for lifetime access, where you're getting over 3 hours of video content, PDF downloads, and questionnaires to help you buy your first home anywhere in British Columbia and do it right, avoiding all of the pitfalls that most home buyers fall into. Well, for a very limited time, we're giving this away for free. Yes, that's right, free. We want more people taking the course so we can fine tune it and make it even better moving forward. So make sure you get your hands on this, because we're not going to be offering this for much longer. Hey, look, I want to thank you for watching today's video. Don't forget to subscribe for more updates, and we'll definitely look forward to seeing you on the next video. Cheers.